And now I am pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. Jeremiah J. Julius is the former chairman of the Lummi Nation and a full-time fisherman. Principal at Julius Consulting LLC, he is the founder and president of the organization Sa Si La, which offers strategies for integrating ancestral knowledge into policies, projects, and partnerships with the will of right and respectful relations. Linda V. Mapes specializes in coverage of the environment and Indigenous culture and governments, and over the course of her 27-year career as a reporter at the Seattle Times, she has won numerous awards. She and a team of journalists at the Seattle Times were finalists for the 2025 Pulitzer Prize for Local Reporting. Her most recent book is The Trees Are Speaking: Dispatches from the Salmon Forests from the University of Washington Press. And Scott Schuyler is an enrolled elder of the Upper Skagit Indian Tribe and has fished the Skagit River for 5 decades. Schuyler is an advocate for the recovery of salmon, grizzly bears, and wolves. 51 years ago, in 1974, Judge George Boldt issued a ruling that affirmed the fishing rights and tribal sovereignty of Native nations in Washington state. The Boldt Decision transformed Indigenous law and resource management across the United States and beyond. Like Brown v. Board of Education, the case also brought about far-reaching societal changes, reinforcing tribal sovereignty, and remedying decades of injustice. Treaty justice is the story of that time and our waters in Washington. Please join me in welcoming Linda, Scott, and Jay to Third Place Books.
Good evening, everyone. How's the volume? Can you hear me well? Yes? Great. It's delightful to see so many of you here tonight. My husband, Doug, and I were a little worried about going up against the Mariners, but here you are. Thank you for caring about history. I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do tonight and tell you that this is a special and rather unusual reading. This is in honor of the late Charles Wilkinson, the author of this book. Very sadly, we lost him. However, his work and his ideas and his contributions will live on forever. And we are here tonight to honor his work and hold it up for you to engage with, enjoy. And if you haven't read the book, you don't own the book, please buy it. It's one of the most important works I've ever read about the Stevens Treaties, about the Boldt Decision, about our local history here in Washington State. And the lessons in this book that Charles Wilkinson brings forward are very, very timely and timeless. So, the meaning of the treaty, 1855. These treaties, the Stevens Treaties, signed with the tribes of Western Washington and others, all the way over to Flathead, Montana. These, I would say, are the most important environmental documents that were ever signed by our governments. Yes, the Treaty of 1855, but just as powerful today. We do not have the largest coal port in North America today, just outside of the Lummi Nation, because of the activism and leadership of the Lummi Nation fighting for their treaty-protected fishing rights. And because of the power of the Stevens Treaties and the leadership of the Lummi Nation and the ancestors of the Lummi people who safeguarded their right forever to fish, hunt, and gather as they always had, according to the treaties that they entered into. I saw something happen that had never happened before. The Corps of Engineers just drop-kicked, stopped, cut off, ended the EIS they were doing for this coal port. And that was entirely because of the treaty fishing rights that your tribe stood up for. So that was not that long ago. And so the meaning of these treaties today is just as powerful, just as important. And not 5 miles from where we sit tonight, I'm very happy to tell you that there is a remarkable fish passage program underway on Lion Creek. Lion Creek, right here in Lake Forest Park, is going to roar again. This creek was stuffed into a culvert, blocking fish passage. Doug and I went to go look at the state of the project today, which is going forward under a lawsuit brought by the treaty tribes to protect their treaty fishing rights to make sure that they would have not only paper fish, but real fish to actually catch forever, where they always had. This lawsuit has brought about culvert repairs all over Western Washington, like the one that's happening on Lion Creek. What is going on right now is so remarkable and so beautiful. What is being built right there is not a culvert at all. It's an undercrossing. It is so wide, so big, so tall that I think not only will salmon and all of their beautiful relations, the salamanders, the frogs, but even a bear could go in there and have a snack. So I would really like it if we could begin tonight on a hopeful note and a grateful note to the treaty tribes of Western Washington for enforcing the Treaty of 1855, which is benefiting us all and future generations. This is a remarkable accomplishment of the treaty tribes, the tradesmen and women who are out there building this beautiful new facility day in and day out, and frankly, all of us for supporting it. Doug and I just drove back through Montana and Idaho, and it felt so good to be back in Washington, a place where people are caring about the meaning of the treaty and trying to learn how to live in right and respectful relations together. It was wonderful to come home. It's wonderful to be with you here tonight. I want to say that if you want to learn more about your local history and go much further than just a land acknowledgement and get into a relationality with the local people of your watershed, you have an opportunity coming right up. This is Sunday on October 19th at the Lake Forest Park Town Commons here, this very place right here, to welcome a new manuscript and celebrate its author, David Berge, who's here tonight. He's a celebrated local historian, and he has a new history coming out. It's a People's History of Lake Forest Park. He's a distinguished author, historian, and teacher, and if you want to continue this work of learning your local history, please join us. We will be here on Sunday, October 19th from 5 p.m. to 6:30. I have flyers right here, and I'm happy to pass those out when we're finished tonight. So let's take a step back. We talked about the Stevens Treaties and the meaning of them, named for Isaac Stevens, of course, coming into a thickly settled landscape in 1855, with deeply embedded management and knowledge systems already here for thousands and thousands of years. This intrusion into these knowledge systems, the displacement of the people already here, this happened because of a quest for commodification for the resources, as they called them, not life forces, all the things that people wanted when they came here. And so the idea was to enter into treaties with the native people in order to settle the landscape and bring all that the people wanted to bring by way of their style of commerce. And this happened very quickly. The treaties were entered into basically in the winter into the spring from Montana to Neah Bay to make this so. And very interestingly, in each one of these treaties, there's one little piece of what really, to the treaty makers on the white side, was just boilerplate, because it's something the ancestors insisted on. And it was a reservation of their rights to forever. That word is important. Fish, hunt, and gather where they always had. The vision of the ancestors was that they knew that to survive this change of worlds, they had to have this ability to take care of themselves and to take care of their culture with their foods and their medicines in their gathering places. And so to the colonizers, to the treaty makers on the white side, this was an easy give. They didn't actually care about this fishing thing. It didn't seem important. They also knew that they were never going to get the signatures without it. And so each one of these treaties, the Stevens Treaties, includes this clause. But what seemed unimportant then became very important to the settlers as they began to realize the incredible value of these fish, the commercial value of these fish. So beginning in the Columbia River and then in Puget Sound came this industrialized fishery, a commodification of the fishery, a pushing away of the original people who had held on to the right to be fishing in their home places. and where they had always fished, this was violent, it was deliberate, and it went on decade after decade, finally culminating in the situation where the state of Washington was very deliberately pushing most of the harvest to the white commercial fishers and restricting and even eliminating the ability of Native people to fish as had been promised in the treaties. Now I want to read to you a little bit in this book because it's very important for you to know, as I had to learn, just how violent this was. This was our Selma. I'll read. Fury on the Puyallup River. Quote, the police were all up on the bridge with rifles, and we could see their rifles kicking, and you could feel the bullets going by. There was nowhere you could go. Washington's Puyallup River, such a fine breeding ground for Pacific salmon, originates in the glacial waters of Mount Rainier and, gathering cool water from tributaries, runs north and northwest through mountain meadow and forests of cedar, fir, and hemlock before flowing into Puget Sound. The Puyallup River bank, near the Pacific Highway Bridge in Tacoma, is calm now. But in the summer of 1970, it provided the site for one of the most terrifying police raids during the violent fish wars of the 1960s and 70s. Indian fishermen believed they were exercising long-standing rights under treaties with the United States to fish for salmon in their traditional ways. The state officers believed that the fishermen were violating valuable state conservation laws. Whether measured in dollars, recreational enjoyment, or Indian culture, Pacific salmon were a mainstay of the Pacific Northwest. In the summer of 1970, with chaotic conflicts regularly erupting on most of northwestern Washington's rivers, events came to a head. Early in August, to support the fishermen down on the river, hundreds of committed Indian people established an encampment on the banks of the Puyallup River. On August 13th, tribal leaders announced that state officers were not welcome and that the tribes themselves would police Indian fishing at the Puyallup encampment. Early September marked the time when the big Chinook, also called king salmon, the most prized of the Pacific salmon, made their summer run up the full-bodied currents of the Puyallup River to spawn. State police scouted the encampment area by boat early in the morning of September 9. Sure enough, the Chinook were charging up the river, and the Indian fishermen were busily working their nets. Indians at the encampment fired 4 warning shots near the police boat. Indian people, their supporters, and curious citizens were streaming into the area. Everyone knew this would be the day. A few hours later, the police, hundreds of them, attacked. Their rifle shots pierced the air, and the stench of tear gas hung over the encampment. Ramona Bennett, chair of the Puyallup tribe and the highest tribal officer at the encampment, lived the violence that day, recalling that police were all up on the bridge with rifles, and we could see their rifles kicking, and you could feel the bullets going by. There was nowhere you could go. I was so scared that my legs were stiff. It was like that Frankenstein walk you do when you are so absolutely terrified. The police prevailed. They arrested more than 60 people, including 5 children. They confiscated the fishermen's catch, nets, and traditional carved cedar canoes. They dragged the fishermen up the rough, rocky riverbanks, making good use of their fists and billy clubs, and jailed them with bail up to $3,500. Then they bulldozed the teepees, wood shelters, and fire pits of the summer-long encampment. Almost miraculously, no one was killed or suffered long-term physical injuries. That was right here, and it was yesterday. But the incredible thing that happened next was the filing of the lawsuit by the U.S. attorney who was present that day in the crowd watching. It is entitled U.S. versus Washington. There is an eternal shame for us in Washington that it took a federal court to bring Washington to its senses, to recognize, finally, the treaty that they had entered into with the United States, in honoring the treaty rights of the first people of this place. That lawsuit was won by the Native Treaty Tribes of Washington State in 1974. But even after the Boldt decision, the fight continued for decades. It wasn't until finally the U.S. Supreme Court ratified that decision unanimously that the fighting finally stopped and gave way to what is the practice today of co-management. And so after that introduction, we are so fortunate tonight to be with two fishermen, two Native leaders of Western Washington tribes who have lived this history. And so I would like to ask you first, Scott, to talk about what was it like after the Boldt decision for your people in terms of what was actually going on the rivers. I think people think, oh, well, they won, and then it was fine, and it was anything but fine. Could you talk about that time?
Yeah, thank you, Linda. You know, for Upper Skagit, we were unique. We didn't have a reservation, so when my ancestor, his name was Pateas, when he signed that treaty, January 22nd, 1855, the Upper Skagit were expected to relocate to other reservations that were established, and of course, we weren't party to those reservations, so our people refused. So we were scattered. And after the state was formed in 1889, they made it illegal for us to fish. And so we were basically driven off our river system up until the Boldt decision. And I remember when I was young, watching the Boldt case unfold on TV. It had a profound effect on my tribe and my people, because the Boldt case, in fact, brought our people back together. We now had a gathering place, the Skagit River, and it brought our people back. Many of our people had moved off to find economic relief elsewhere. My family had to end up becoming farmers, if you would, because we were always under threat of arrest. And we are under threat of arrest this very day. You know, Linda was talking about the history, but many of the same stuff goes on and on today. In fact, the state of Washington has informed us that Upper Skagit hunters would be arrested in our ancestral hunting grounds right now as we speak. And the Skagit, you know, the violence that happened back in the 70s is still going on. If you look at the state website, there's a little notice saying why the river is closed to sport fishing. When we're fishing, it's because of the violence that goes on every time we have a fishery, and they have to separate the two fisheries. So we've made many gains over the years, and I'm very thankful that, again, my ancestors signed the treaty, because it from our perspective, it saved the salmon. Not only saved our people, saved our way of life, but it also helped us have a voice to save the salmon and other species that are important to us. I probably rambled a little bit, but
No, I really appreciate that answer. And Jay, I wanted to ask you the same. As a fisherman and as a former chairman of the Lummi Nation, could you reflect for us a little bit about what it was like at Lummi after the Boldt decision? What was it like for your fishermen and your families and your kids in school?
Yeah. Well, kids in school, I have, for the record, I was born in 75, a year after.
He's bragging.
No, but I grew up on a boat, and I often share that this scar comes from when I was about 5 years old, out off of San Juan Island on Skype Solomon's boat, my uncle, who my father fished with. So I per se in all my childhood, teenage, and I think what's unique about us is in the 40s and in the 50s, we had a lot of purse seiners, Lummi did. And it wasn't until 1890s that, alas, you know, the trees, the mountains were scalped, and you know, that was the number one resource. So the river was diverted, the Nooksack kind of only went to Bellingham Bay now, used to go to the Gulf of Georgia. And Lummi were primarily saltwater people. So reef nets were and are everything as it relates to the 1855 treaty. Usual and accustomed with the 14 chiefs references reef net locations and ownership, inherent title. But we continued fishing, so oftentimes Alaska packers would use a Lummi to captain and fish. So we fished through a lot of this. We started a hatchery in 69. So in 74, when the decision came out, it was still challenging, and most school teachers did something in the summer, and that's fish. So when they weren't teaching at school at Ferndale for us, the teachers were fishing in Bellingham Bay and San Juan Islands, and it really pissed them off that in their mind they lost 50%. We were harvesting, Scott, 2%, approximately 2% of the total catch at the time leading up to the Boldt decision. So, but for us, Linda, what happened is we really were able to gear up and go back out fishing. The governor still patrolled from Treaty Rock to Point Francis and on reservation fishing. But the Tulalip farmer in charge said it really well in the 1800s. The Lummis are the most self-sufficient and cocky of all Indians I've ever overseen. Wrote a letter to the president. And the Lummis really went fishing and built their fleet back up.
So I think what's true, though, is that today all of us are still trying to realize the promise of these treaties and also what should be a much more abundant fishery for everyone. And I think, too, that we're still fighting some of these same fights against the very things that make it possible to have that fishery. And Scott, I want to talk about Skagit relicensing. So here we sit. Some of the power here is probably coming from those dams. I don't even know. But for those of you who get power from Seattle City Light, it's important for you to know that the relicensing is underway for those dams on the Skagit system. And Scott, I wonder if you could share some thoughts on this in the context of the treaty-protected fishing right and what was promised versus where this relicensing is headed.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I was fishing yesterday. I left the river to come down here because fishing wasn't so good, which just tells me that we need to do more. We need to continue to do our work and do our due diligence. And I feel the weight of the ancestors pushing us to continually advocate for the salmon. The relicensing that we're going through with Seattle City Light, it's been a long process, but I can say some of these things now because City Light has said this themselves, that they're going to provide fish passage, which is a huge victory for the river. They're going to re-water the dewatered stretch of the Skagit River, which is a cultural impact to my tribe. So there's a lot of great things that are coming down the pike. We firmly believe that this fish passage program will have a profound effect on the runs on the Skagit and will make a difference. Because right now, in 2025, we saw a historical low of Skagit summer Chinook. And in my lifetime, again, I've fished for a long time. I don't know how much I got left in the tank anymore because it hurts, to be honest with you. I've seen the last of many fisheries. I've seen the last spring Chinook fishery in 1988, the last wild summer fall Chinook fishery in 1991, and the last wild chum salmon in 2007. This is a legacy I don't want to leave myself with and my kids with. And so, again, we're working with City Light, we're working with Puget Power to get these runs back to where they should be and provide fish, not only for us, but for everybody. And to us, it's about providing a quality of life. Whether you eat salmon or not, the fact that your rivers have salmon in them is a good thing. And again, it makes everybody's quality of life better for all of us.
Thank you. Jay, I have a question for you. So President Trump just threw out all of the agreements in place to replace services of the lower Snake River dams in preparation for dam removal on the Snake River, should Congress ever decide to make that decision. So reneging on those agreements basically takes us right back to where we were many years ago. We're going to hear an announcement, I think it actually even was today, of renewal of the lawsuit that the Nez Perce tribe brought to try to bring about dam removal on the lower Snake, to try to revive the fish runs in the Columbia Basin. Cecilia, your foundation has centered its efforts on the voice of the salmon people and on Mother Earth. And I wonder if you could speak to this moment. What do the treaties require? What now should happen?
Daryl Hilaire said something interesting during the Arlico Creek fight to protect the forest, and what he said is his ancestors from Lummi always fought the fight and never gave up, and never give up. I think that's important, and it's important for all of us to you mentioned treaties when you opened up, Treaty of 1855. I think there's a perception that treaties are an Indian thing, and it's so far from the truth. It's yours. It's your treaty. It's not an Indian thing, and it's not an Indian treaty. It's your treaty. So what does that mean? And if the Columbia and the Snake has become stagnant in a lake, and honoring the treaty with the Nez Perce, and as Chairman Wheeler states, we entered into a contract with one another. We negotiated with one another. We trusted one another. And where are they? What's the state of the salmon? What was the salmon population in when they signed the treaty? What is it now? What does that guarantee mean to you as a citizen? Not taking sides, but what is honor? And I think it's really important for us, all of us, to stand and reflect on our view of honor and what did our forefathers enter into. And if the treaty with the tribes, which was the largest real estate transaction that helped the immigrants become legal citizens of this place, and they met with the true sovereigns of the land. That's what these treaties are. The treaty with Lummi is my great-great-great-great-grandfathers met with the immigrant, negotiated, and we came to a peace treaty which created the state in 1889. That's what it is. It's yours. It's not an Indian thing. And what little were reserved and put in place to the end of time, it's just a right to fish. It's a way of life. So I think that's important as it relates to the Snake River. Things are going to happen, and you've seen a lot. You've spoke a lot and been a voice for much. And Chairman Wheeler doesn't lose hope. We pivot, and we have to keep fighting the fight and never give up, and we have to stand with them. Chairman Wheeler at an event said something that really stood out to me, to the audience. I believe you were there in Seattle, or maybe at the Run event, but he asked a really, and he's so calm, and he's so works well with any government, and he's but he's a warrior too, but he's gentle, he communicates well. But he looked at everyone and all of us, and he asked you, when was the last time you really suffered? We've been suffering and suffering for a century, over a century, but we're still here. We're still at the table. What's great is we're not on the menu as much as we were, but we're at the table now with you. But when was the last time you suffered, like the salmon, like the rivers, like the Nez Perce people, like the Umatilla people? And I think that question really can help us to really have empathy for that suffering. They don't want sympathy. They're not asking for sympathy, but they want to stop something, the inevitable, if we don't do anything about it. So it's kind of where we're at, is stand with them and be a voice when asked. And I'll be at Run in Oregon, October 28th, 29th, with Chairman Wheeler and others, and everyone should go. It's important.
It's in Portland. You're all invited. I want to ask each of you to speak a little bit about this present moment. It kind of feels like a time in our history when almost anything could happen. I mean, the last time the treaties were really threatened was when Senator Slade Gorton was in office, and he took several direct swipes at sovereignty unsuccessfully and was subsequently unseated. And I just wonder what kind of conversations you all are having in your tribal governments about this present partner in the White House, and are you concerned that we might see a run at sovereignty, an effort by Congress to abrogate treaties?
Yeah, I know Upper Skagit's very concerned with what's going on right now. Every day there's something new. There's a new attack going on, whether it's roadless rule, logging, mining, these things that, generally we stand against. We want to protect the environment. That's what we do. We're standing for the salmon, for the wildlife, and we have to continue to do everything we can. Use that native voice to people that will listen. One of the things I've always taught my daughter is, use your voice for the good, because people will tend to gravitate towards a tribal perspective and use that to speak for the environment. So we are very concerned with what's going on right now. We have to continue to work with partners where we can find partners and continue to reverse what's going on. And hopefully, this will not result in the loss of these reserved rights and the precious natural resources. The recent attack on public lands was another example. There's so few precious public lands. We just can't afford to lose any to development. We just can't get in that mindset because they're irreplaceable. And when these lands are lost, the habitat's lost, not only for salmon, for wildlife, and all the things that are important, not just to the tribes, but to everybody here in this room. So it's a big issue for us.
Jay, what kinds of thoughts are in your mind and in your heart in this moment that we're seeing in our country? Are you concerned for sovereignty? Are you concerned for the treaties?
Yeah, I think it's important to be on alert, and I don't know that we've ever seen the stars align the way they are right now as a big of a threat as it is today. So definitely on alert, and it is concerning because there's so much time left, right? There's there's a lot of time left, and it is concerning. But at the same time, you can't dwell on that concern. There's so much we have to do in terms of the work, and we've survived a lot. Everything has survived a lot, and whatever happens, I know we'll stand up, and we've got a lot of voices. I'm not big on internet, social media, and where we are in today's world. However, I think with voices like yourself and those here and throughout the world, culverts, Gorsuch. I was at Supreme Court in 2018. We were concerned, but the best outcome that could have came in the decision. It was announced in 2019, and it was a 4-4 split. But the positioning and the structure of Supreme justices now, yes, definitely concerned.
I'd like to ask you, Scott, to reflect for a moment. Going forward, to build on the victory of the Boldt decision and it being upheld by the Supreme Court, and the victory on the culvert case, and the victory at Cherry Point, there have been so many important moments at which the tribes have helped us move forward and hold on to the precious natural world. I like to think of us all as guests here, all of us, of Mother Earth. And what is the first rule of a good guest? Don't break anything. What is the second thing? Bring a gift. What is the third thing? Be helpful. And so I would like to ask each of you to share with us what can we be working toward to make sure that these treaty rights that all of us have committed to and that mean so much to us, such that we will, I hope, have a bear chasing a salmon through Lion Creek in maybe 5 years, 10 years. What can we do to build on that success and that reality?
Vote. Be educated. I like to say that, we're borrowing from our kids' future today. And, down the road, we think in terms of generations from the tribal perspective. And we're playing the long game right now. And we need to make sure that there's something for our kids' kids down the road and give them something to work with. The stuff that we inherited today, it needs help. We're in maintenance mode, if you would, for the treaty. We're basically spinning our wheels, treading water. And, it's sad to say that, it's 2025 and you would think everything's laid out in stone. It's not. It's a never-ending fight with the state of Washington. And there's more cases that are going to need to be brought just to tread water and to make positive gains. It's a little early to think about building more cases right now. again, when we're trying to just sustain what we got, the few victories that we have. Like I said before, we're under a threat of arrest right now as we speak, and the Skagit is as bad as it always was back in the 70s. So we still have a lot of work there to do. And again, it's about education to let people know why we do the things we do, why we fish. Again, the deal was struck, and we're doing our part to make sure that there's salmon for the future. So we hope everybody can play the role that they have, by educating others that are not quite as educated. And again, get out there and get rally support for all these issues that should matter to all of us.
Jay?
I agree with everything Scott said, and we are guests. I think in our creation story, it's important to note, or any creation story, us humans are never first. So what does that mean? Something was here first, the four-leggeds, the winged, the fish, everything in the water was second, and we were third, and I think there's a lot of common sense in that. So we are guests, and Chairman Wheeler at Nez Perce in Lummi has the same ancient covenant with the salmon, and we still take that very seriously today with Salmon Woman. It's while it is mythical, it does something when you tell your child a story from birth to all growing up. It does something to a kid. Stories do, and those ancient stories are ancient covenants that our great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were taught, and it all relates to that no supremacy over nature. They die for us, they give for us, they sacrifice for us. So it's much more than that. And I think one of the hopes is how do we can't imagine abandoning our ancestors. We're a place-based people. I'm one hug away from pre-contact, raised by my great-grandparents, 1888, 1891. They died in 80 and 81. They were raised by pre-contact individuals. So still today, it's hard to begin to fathom what it means to abandon a people's ancestors, like what was done in Europe, and seek and search for a new place to call home. But I think what we wonder is, at what point, when your ancestors are in the ground and buried in a new place, does it become a sacred place, so sacred that you'll protect it, fight like it's your mother, like it's your giver of life? That's, what I think as a guest, but also the sacredness and the protection that comes from belonging. You won't abuse it like a bad guest. And I think that's where we're at, but I hope we can reach that point where, there's something there. A couple hundred generations of being here, we see it from a different lens, we feel it different. We have grief, severe grief with the Snake River, with the Skagit River, with the Nooksack, next is Alaska. And if we keep going on this trajectory, the inevitable, it happened in Europe, East Coast, Sacramento, Mexico River, now it's Columbia, Skagit, Nooksack, Fraser, Alaska, and we hold on to hope, though, and I think we have to fight like it's our mother, like we belong.
I appreciate that, and I want to also share that I just got back from a trip to the East Coast, and New England today is home to one of the largest rewilding and reforestation realities anywhere in the world. This is a 6-state region that was cut to the ground in the 1900s, and it has grown back. And with the trees have come the animals. There are more people living closer to more wildlife today than in many generations in New England. And so when you say, bring back the grizzly bear, welcome back the wolf, take care of the salmon, revive the Quiltamajden, the people who live under the sea, the orca, we can do these things. I've seen them happen with my own feet. I've walked in those regrown forests. There are fisher cat in those trees. The earth is alive, and there's nothing more powerful than nature. So I do want to speak on behalf of this beautiful book and call its message forward. It is a hopeful message of what we can do when we stand for what is right and what is good. And that's just what we're here to stand up for tonight. So with that, we will take your questions. And we can't see a thing. Maybe we could turn the lights on, because we don't need it this way. Let's turn on the house lights, please, so we can all see one another. Oh, that's so much better. Thank you. Yes. Oh, good.
I just, there's no hands up. Don't hesitate to put your hands up. But really quick, I love this man. I love Charles and the author of this book. And I just feel so honored to be able to call him a friend. And it's so well written, and he was just such a sharp, brilliant, humble man. And he called me and he said, "Hey Jay, can we, we hadn't talked in a while, and he's got this scratchy voice, and he goes, I'm writing my last book, and it's on the Boldt Decision. I want to interview you." And I said the same thing when I opened. I'm like, Charles, I was born in 75, man. And he goes, "Yeah, but Jay, your grandpa's Vernon, and you fished your whole life, and da-da-da-da-da." So I go, "Okay, I'll put it in my calendar." I was sharing this with Doug, and I didn't put it in my calendar. And he called me on that day, and I forgot. And I was on my boat, and it was perfect. I shut off my boat, and we talked for a long time. But when I opened it up, there's only one sentence about me, so I didn't get a chance to call him and no. But... But if you get a chance, or if you can remember, Google, "What about those promises?" And watch him and the important part he plays in the Treaty of 1855 when the launch of Children of the Setting Sun was the fire started again with that play, and he was in it. And I really appreciate this man so much, because it was so important, and he would fly out here and spend so much time and memorize all the legalities that led up to this, and he just did a great job. So if you get a chance, you'll hear it in his voice and you'll see it in his eyes. He's just a really sincere, great man. I have to express that. I love this guy.
I'm so glad you said that. Thank you. He has quite an oeuvre, by the way. He has many books, and each and every one of them is very special. So if you haven't been reading Charles Wilkinson, you owe yourself the treat and the education. How about some questions, comments, thoughts? Right here, second row.
You said that in the Boldt Decision it was the fishing rights were divided 50-50. How is it determined that someone got their 50 or assigned them their 50 versus the other 50?
So the question was, and under the Boldt Decision, it was decided the catch will be divided 50-50. So how do you know if someone's gotten their 50 and their 50? I'm going to turn that one to either one of you, because you know all about co-management.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I'm also the fisheries manager for the tribe for the last 4 decades. Basically, you take all the rivers' spawning escapement needs to make sure that the runs are sustainable. You take that off the top, if you would, for all the runs, and anything above that becomes harvestable. And of that harvestable share of fish, we split it with the state 50-50. But on the tribal side, since there's so many of us tribes, that 50% on the tribal side is split up among many of the tribes, so it's not all going to one tribal entity. And of course, that's assuming that there's harvestable fish to begin with. Like I said earlier today, Skagit needs a lot of work yet, and we're hoping to partner with City Light to have a bright future. But right now, there's not a lot of harvestable fish. But that's basically how it works in layman's terms.
And the state struggles with math still today.
Math, yeah.
Yes, right up front.
So you didn't mention anything about the ORIC decision that came later, and that really seems to be the underpinning for a whole lot of what's happening, including your visit to Lion Creek today. So if you could say a little bit about what that allowed, or what that is driving now that goes beyond what the original Boldt decision.
So the question was about the ORIC decision and how that's driving so much of what's going on now, including in Lion Creek. Jay, maybe that's a good one for you.
The ORIC.
nets in the water and have them come up empty? The idea that there needed to be environmental.
Oh, 78. Yeah, right?
Should use the mic.
Yeah. I was sitting in Supreme Court, and I don't remember her name, the justice. I believe, anyway, the first question asked to the state was, or it wasn't even a question, it was a statement. Was his name Noel? You said in the lower courts, you, the state, can kill every single fish in Washington state, and the tribe's treaties can do nothing about it, can't stop you. And he backtracked really quick. But a right to a moderate living, which is a big part of the Culverts case. Skagit was a part of this, right? One of the 13 interveners. Later became 14 because Quinault came in the end. So to us, a right to a moderate living language and the importance of that in 78, it's for the Lummi people is non-negotiable, period. For some others, it might be negotiable. For us, it's not, period. So that was, I guess some label it the environmental side of the Boldt decision. It's been incredibly, like you stated when you opened up, some of the greatest environmental decisions, or the Treaty of 1855 is one of the greatest environmental protections that all of us have. And then leading up to the Boldt decision, and then the 78, the environmental side of it has proven to be huge, and life-saving and hope for the future of the existence of salmon and me in the rivers.
Powerful because it insists that what the ancestors expected wasn't just a promise, but actually fish. And if you're going to have fish, you have to have water, and it has to be able to run downhill, and it has to be cold, and it has to be clean. And so that fulfills the treaty promise more completely, and it's driven some of the most powerful effects that we're seeing so far, including the Culverts case. Another question? Yes, David. Never ask the historian. Oh, no. Go ahead, lay it on us.
We have two competing trajectories, and one is development and increased population growth because that brings in more taxes. The second one is preservation. And I would like to hear, do you think we have hope in terms of lessening the trajectory of development for the sake of the trajectory of preservation? Do you see reasons for hope?
So the question was, given that we want to do development to raise taxes for local governments versus the need for preservation, how do you reconcile that conflict? And can there really be any hope for salmon, given that we make our money off destroying their habitat? I'm rephrasing, but that was basically the gist. I know the rant that I want to have right now, but I'll turn it over to the fishermen and tribal leaders. Scott, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, one of the things that it just depends on where you are, really. Like Skagit is not completely developed, so there's hope there. And I'm not saying that there's no hope down here, down at the Wamish, these types of areas, because there's always hope. You can do things to repair the environment to the extent that get fish back. But here's an example. You know, back home, we're supporting conservation easements along the river, repairing habitat where you can, and supporting purchase of private lands for conservation areas. We're always going to support these areas. Right now, again, there's a lot of available land in Skagit to do this type of work, so there is hope there. You know, with our friends, is there anybody from Muckleshoot or down here today? No? Well, our friends from Muckleshoot, you know, their sockeye have disappeared because of the environmental conditions that are going on in Lake Washington and in their watershed. In fact, they've asked us for sockeye eggs to help them. And, had really mixed feelings. I really want to help them and I have empathy for their needs, but the reality of it is, it doesn't matter how many eggs we're going to give you guys. It's just they're not going to come back because of the habitat state that you have right here. So we're kind of reconciling that right now, but it's just one of those sad facts that until the environment repairs itself or people repair the environment, you're not going to get salmon back. So you got to do your work first.
The Duwamish are also involved in that effort.
Yeah.
Jay?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question and I think an important question. And we spoke on another topic earlier today, and this kind of came up. We have different philosophies. We see the world from different lenses, you and I. And in 1855, we were forced into an arranged marriage. And our languages are different, our philosophies are different, but we're stuck in this marriage. My people are stuck. And it's very abusive. But when we entered into this marriage, we spoke for Quethalmachton, we spoke for the rivers, we weren't the only ones who signed. We signed on behalf of everything, and that's what you see, and you've seen in the court cases from Lummi in 1894, 95, Alaska Packers, 1927, leading up to today. We don't come out and say that, but it's evident in our philosophy. Money's not our culture. Salmon is everything. Culture, salmon, salmon's culture. We're not tree huggers, we're one with nature. We understand the common sense of being interconnected, and what we do to it happens to us inevitably. So development, I sat in they called it the Hearst Fix. I testified against it in Olympia in 2017, 2018. And development was stagnant where I lived, in Whatcom County. But then once that was passed, went through development. So we're at a point right now with our river where, you can walk across it where, my family lived on the river and dove off the bridge and drank from this river, and now it's nearly nothing. So that's the reality. We think what's going on with the Sacramento or the Colorado River, and with all the people that rely on that, and we think it might be a long ways away here. I don't believe that, because we're following and going down that same path, and it boils down to water. And we're dealing with that right now. It's the real big thing before us as we speak.
Yes. Oh, okay. Just one? Okay. I'll keep bargaining. Yes.
So I'm struck by the many, many, many different challenges to preservation of salmon and really preservation of the world I think I want to live in. My world here has changed a lot in ways that I don't like. I've lost a lot from the world in which I grew up here. And I'm curious as to how you're allocating your mental and financial resources, whether you're able to look at long-term policy development or whether you're kind of stuck just having to put out fires because there are so many, many challenges. Salt's big from Puget Sound and the erosion of the conditions there to the loss of urban streams, to federal policy, to the depletion of funding. Even a federal shutdown that has no one not working. All of these things just seem to be chipping away at that's just nip, nip, nip at So how do you do that? What is your strategy or thinking in approaching what is a very complex issue?
So the question was, with so many fires burning, are you able to keep a long-term vision? What is your strategy faced with these many, many challenges? It'd be great to hear you respond to that, because I think that's a question all of us have. How do we live in this moment productively, with vision, with care, with love, productively?
That's that's a great question, and I'd like to say that we have a cohesive plan, but we don't. I mean, you're absolutely right. We're putting out fires every single day right now. We're trying to play the long game, which is what we do, and get through this dark period that we're in right now. But, you know, the future is kind of bleak right now, and we're overstaffed, undermanned, under-resourced, but we're doing the best, and we're looking for partners. You know, I'm part of many organizations like Washington Wild, the Skagit Fisheries Enhancement Group. I'm spending, my lovely wife here could attest how much time I spend during my off hours basically advocating for the environment, and we're just using every bit of daylight time available to further the agenda, you know, speak for the environment. You know, we're not speaking for the salmon, we're not speaking for the orca, not speaking for the wolves, bears. We're speaking for all of us, because if we let them go, we're letting ourselves go. So that's our mindset.
Jay?
Allocation of emotional, financial.
I mean, I didn't want to say allocation of resources because I'm not talking about who gets what fish.
Yeah.
I'm talking about from that perspective of you only have so many hours in the day, so many people that you work with, so much money to spend, but yet there are policies at state and federal and city and county levels that are happening all the time. You're seeing habitat loss, rapid,
Yeah.
you know, or soft. I mean, how do you pick and choose?
It's absolutely 100% nonstop. You celebrate a victory May 9th, 2016, based on the Army Corps of Engineers' decision to deny a permit at the coal port. It's not like everything was paused. I mean, next year, Lummi will be able to act as a sovereign, a true sovereign, be a true sovereign without the interception of the state. That's never been done. So the wraparound services we so badly need, the ability to generate revenue as a governing body, as a sovereign, it's not until next year. People wonder why tribes have casinos. Well, the fact of the matter is the state and counties have intercepted 100% of our ability to tax. And that's going to change next in 2026. I use these words don't make sense. I don't even think they're real, but I would use the word mafiatistic, criminalistic in these tax negotiations with the state, like Vicki Smith and Governor Inslee, you know, years ago, leading up to this. And but that's what we've dealt with. So the fights don't ever stop for us, and they won't stop for our kids. And they're not punch it out fights. It's again back to how do we celebrate a great marriage with each other? We weren't at odds in 1848 when Hudson Bay put their stick up at San Juan Island, and you know, we worked together, and it wasn't war, but something shifted, and something is still there today, post timber and leading into Alaska Packers. Something happened, and it doesn't have to be that way, but anyway, yeah, it doesn't stop. It never stopped for my grandpa Vernon. It never stopped for my grandmother Nancy and their parents. It's just something. It's just there. It doesn't end.
I want to offer just one note of perspective. I've been paying a lot of attention to the Arctic lately, and therefore reading a lot of the history of conservation of the Arctic and Alaska. And in 1900, Teddy Roosevelt was fighting against what he called the graspers, to preserve wild nature in Alaska, 1900. So this isn't new. It's not special just for us. This is our fight, just like it's always been the fight, and it's yours too. And I don't really like the word fight because it's rather negative and unpleasant. Why don't we call it what it is? It's a calling. It is our calling to stand for the bears, the wolves, the salmon, all our relations. And we're all here together now in this place. This is all of our work to do. So let's call it that. This is our work. Yes?
I agree with you that it's the water. And I'm interested in your point of view, how we can correct the water cycle to help our climate and salmon. There's different areas in the world where they've started sponge cities, and that can bring cooling water to the aquifer, to the streams for the salmon. What are your opinions on how to heal our water cycle?
So the question is, how can we heal the water cycle? I know what I would speak up for. Trees.
Trees, yep.
Trees. Scott, Jay?
That's a great question. And Jay said the same thing. My family, we had a cabin on the Skagit River. My great-grandmother and grandfather above just below New Halem. And they used to draw water right from the river, and we used to drink from the river. I wouldn't dare do that today, but I was telling somebody the other day, in fact, if the river ever turns clear in the summer, that's the end of us. Then we're going to end up like the Nooksack. Right now, the Skagit is milky and chocolatey blue because the glaciers are intact. But I say intact, but they're also receding dramatically. And so when that day comes that we lose the glaciers, through climate change, I mean, that's what it is, climate change. We're going to be in a world of hurt, and we're going to be in the same boat as many of these other rivers like the Nooksack that are just too warm to support salmon, or in fact human. And we should all be concerned about that because we all need water. If the water is gone, we're gone. So great question.
Jay? Okay. Well, I was told one more, and we've had two. So I'm going to do one more just because I can. All right. Who gets it? Hands up. Yes.
This is a simple question. I think about with my own family, we sit around and I hear stories of way back when. And your way back when goes a lot farther than anybody else's in this room. I'm wondering if you have stories of what it was like to have clean water and salmon, and how they went and fished, and what was it like?
So the question was, tell us, what was it like when there was clean water and abundant salmon, and how did they fish? What was it like? Do you have stories about that? Could you share some of that?
When Chief Seattle would come to Lummi and visit us, the first thing he would ask for was water. And that goes for any visiting people from other places who were coming to a territory. Water back then was the most precious and most important resource. Fresh water. This actually goes back. My mom was born in 55. My father was born in 55. They were labeled the river rats at Lummi. And they grew up on the river with Chief Salik. Salik was the same age as Yakship, my Uncle Rod. And they didn't have running water. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have toilets in the house. But the coolest thing about that reality and that truth, like you'll hear from Jewel James, Zatziel, is they didn't know they were poor. They had no, we might label, or they might be labeled dirt poor now. They ate fish every day. They drank from the river. They had family. They had community. Yes, they were isolated to this federal prison called the Lummi Reservation, but it was even rich. I mean, one of our goals at Lummi is, based on your question and the decision in '78 and the environmental side of Boldt, was how do we get back to 85 numbers not even the 70s and 60s and 50s, but in the 60s and 70s, even when I was a kid, it was amazing fishing the San Juan Islands and where I grew up and where we're from. But the abundance was just, and we're reef net people, right? Shwala people. Lummi are reef net people. And so those stories from great-grandpa Felix and my grandma Nancy are just incredible, especially, because it's your intellectual, it's an inherent right passed down through, genealogy and generations. So just in abundance. In tune, everything was in tune, in harmony, and alive. Completely opposite. Newcomers who come here from Texas, California, East Coast, they see magical beauty, right? Here in Seattle, San Juan Islands, Whatcom County. But the Quethalmachtan, the salmon, the rivers, the indigenous people, their world's upside down. It's just we see it from a different lens. And but that's what it was, in tune, perfection.
Well, let's keep our minds on the idea of perfection. Scott, do you want to add a little more to that?
Yeah, I guess we consider ourselves wealthy historically, not wealthy in the European sense of money, and the fact that the river took care of us. Again, at treaty time, there was an abundance of salmon that people thought was never ending. And from our perspective, we felt the government thought that, hell, there's no cost to us because there's thousands and thousands of salmon. And who would have thought, if we didn't think, that the salmon would disappear someday. So again, it puts the burden today on our ancestors that did sign the treaty, on their ancestors today, Jay and I, to continue to go out and advocate for these resources in the salmon. So it's a never-ending job to ensure that salmon survives. But again, it's about our survival, too, all of our survival. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. You've been a wonderful audience. I want to call out these beautiful books. This one is absolutely brand new. It's beautiful reading about right and respectful relations, and it's a very special book. This book, I have to say, I think mine is pretty great too. Ramona Bennett, our honored elder, she has finally brought out her memoir. I read it in manuscript and was so excited about it. I called up Nicole, who's here tonight, the University of Washington Press director, and said, Nicole, you've got to publish this manuscript. And to my great joy and delight, she and Laren McLaughlin, who's also here tonight, worked hard to bring that book out. So these are very special books by local people about this place, about our history. So please give them your attention. Please share them. Please read them. And thank you all for being here tonight. And don't forget, I've got flyers here. If you want to continue your learning, People's History of Lake Forest Park with David Berge, who's here tonight, also with us. It's on Sunday, October 19th, right here, 5 to 6:30 in the evening. Thank you very much.